We'll get this started here in about 1 minute. All right, I think it's about time we get started. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining us. My name is Connor Wrighton, and I'm the Communications Manager for the Northwest Gas Association. We're really excited to have Randy Friedman and Pat Haworth here to talk about their company's respective gas storage systems. Before we begin, I want to go over a little bit of basics for how these work. We have set aside quite a bit of time for questions, and we strongly encourage you to ask them as they come up. Each of you will be muted throughout the presentation, so please use the text box to type your questions, and I will interject as needed to introduce those questions. So if you look at the GoToMeeting control panel, you will notice that there is a section for chat, and type your message there. Please let me know if you have any problems over email. If anyone's interested in getting a PDF copy of these presentations, I know I spoke to Randy earlier and he gave me permission, and I will get that from Pat, see if that's possible later as well. Please send me an email at creiten@nwga.org, and I'd be happy to send you a copy of one or both of those before the close of business today. It may be easier for you just to respond to the email that I sent out this morning with the information to access this, and I'd be happy to send it to you through that portal. So, as some of you may know, the Northwest Gas Association hosts these once a month typically on the last Thursday of every month. But next month we will be back on November 17th with the regional economic update from a perennial favorite from the annual energy conference, Grant Forsyth of Avista. That webinar will begin at the normal noon time, and you can sign up at nwga.org. And I encourage you to sign up as early as possible, as we did sell out this month. So please be sure to get that in as soon as possible if you would like to attend. And finally, also before I move on, I'd like to just again beg everyone to take a look at your calendar and mark off June 7th and 8th for the annual energy conference at Skamania Lodge. We had a great time last year and expect that we will have a similarly great program for you then. Finally, want to introduce the NWGA for those who might not be familiar with us and what we do. We represent the 6 investor-owned gas utilities that operate in the Pacific Northwest, along with 3 large natural gas transmission lines. Our members are located in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and British Columbia. And as always, you can visit our website at nwga.org for more information, or send me an email at creiten@nwga.org. And without further ado, I'm going to pass things along to our first presenter, Randy Friedman, who's going to be going for about 20 minutes. Again, please type in any questions you may have, and we can get to those at the end. And then we will move on after that to Pat. So, Randy, I will kick things over to you if you are ready to go.
I'm ready to go, Connor. So can people see Connor, can you see my screen now?
Not yet. Let me just get that over to you. The request should be there right now.
There it is.
Perfect.
Let me get rid of this thing. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I have 13 slides I'm going to go through. My habit is not to read my slides. I think you all appreciate that. I will stress what needs to be stressed and embellish what needs to be embellished. This opening slide shows a cross-section of some sandstone. It's not sandstone from mist, it's from New Mexico, but it makes my point that mist is a natural gas field. We're using now natural gas production reservoirs that have been converted to storage. It's not an aquifer, it's not a salt dome. So that was the point of that slide. Taking all the information here is publicly available or can be made available. This one's from an investor relations slide. And the one point I wanted to make on this is that, as a lot of you know, but maybe not everybody knows, we also own operate a merchant storage facility in California called Gill Ranch. So it's not part of our utility. It's not something I rely upon for my core portfolio, but we are kind of tuned into what's going on in California as far as storage developments, and we're in great shape with mist. Depending on what comes out of California, I think we're in great shape. The one thing I've put in bold on this slide is a rate recovery mechanism that I'm referring to as mist recall, and I'm going to get more into detail on that in a little bit. At a very high level, this is a slide or picture that I've taken from the Northwest Gas Association Gas Outlook. So you know it's correct. The mist is a star on the kind of middle left-hand side that has a 536 next to it. That stands for 536,000 decatherms a day of maximum deliverability. That is up to date. You might see other numbers out there because mist is actually certificated in volumetric units in cubic feet, but with the hotter gas that's been on the Northwest Pipeline system the last couple of years, we can get more decatherms out of mist. So that represents the current decatherm number for peak. And a portion of that's being used by Northwest Natural for its core portfolio, and a portion of it's being sold into the interstate market. And I'll get more into divvying that up in a minute. A closer look where mist sits relative to Portland. Portland actually doesn't say Portland on there, but it's the area kind of in the lower middle part of that screen. Mist is a commercial gas field, but probably wouldn't be a commercial gas field if it wasn't for the fact that it's less than 60 miles from downtown Portland. We've got where it says South Mist Feeder on this slide, that originally that was a 16-inch line. It's been looped with 24-inch pipe to a point kind of in the west part of the Portland metro area. And then there's the 24-inch pipe continues around the west and south side of the Portland metro area to interconnect with Northwest Pipeline at a place called Molalla. I'll talk more about the Northmiss project later on. If you're a mist interstate storage customer, the 2 points you can take service from us are at Molalla or Deer Island. That's where we've actually worked with Northwest Pipeline to make those points bidirectional. We have compression at both sites so that we could actually physically, if needed, move gas back into the interstate, although most of the time it happens by displacement. Some facts about mist storage. It's a nice view of the central facility there, which if you're up there, they refer to it as Miller Station in honor of Ron Miller, who was the CEO of North Central when the facility was first being built. So you've got control buildings and compressor buildings and gathering facilities at Miller Station. The thing I wanted to point out on this slide is down near the bottom, over 50 production reservoirs have been discovered. It was 51 as of 2009. I think one may have been discovered since then. We're using 7 of them. We've converted 7 of them into storage operation. Of course, we tended to pick the best ones and then the ones that were adjacent to the ones that we had picked. But there's plenty of additional reservoirs that are kind of in the batter circle, ready to be used in the future if needed. There's the number that's certificated, 515 million cubic feet a day of deliverability, which, as I mentioned before, because of the hotter gas that's on the pipeline system right now, translates into something closer to 536,000 decatherms a day, 16 BCF of working gas, and right now 4 compressors. So the next 2 slides actually go through how we've divvied up mist between our core and this interstate market, where it says ISS, that's Interstate Storage Service. So the blue core represents what we've been using for our core utility on the system, and back in 2001 we got FERC authorization to offer mist service in interstate markets, and we started pre-building basically for the core. So we have been adding reservoirs, added compression, and as needed, matching up with our load growth, we will recall some of that to serve our core market. And you can see how that has changed over the years. We never break an interstate storage contract, but what happens is as they come up for renewal, and they have staggered terms, as they come up for renewal, we evaluate whether we can renew them or whether the capacity or some of that capacity needs to be recalled for the core. So right now we have about 305,000 decatherms a day of mist that's being used for the core utility, and the rest is being sold in the interstate market. Next slide is the same idea, but now it's the working gas capacity. So you've got close to 11 BCF that is being used by the core, and the rest of the 16 BCF is being sold in the interstate market as we speak. This is my wordiest slide, sorry about that. But I'm going to go into the why this interstate storage service was such a win-win for both our customers and our shareholders. We're developing mist storage ahead of what is needed for our core, and that's investments being made by our shareholders. For our FERC tariff, our mist interstate storage customers are firm. They have the same priority as our core utility customers. So it's only when mist interstate contracts come to the end of their term that we evaluate whether or not they should be renewed or that capacity needs to be recalled for our core. That determination is made in the summertime to basically give notice to an interstate storage customer that their contract will or will not be renewed, because the contracts tend to start in April or May of the next year. So it basically gives them a winter to pull the gas out of their account. It's not going to be renewed. And then that capacity is available in the spring to start being filled by either us as the core or by the next mist interstate storage customer. The benefits for our core customers from the structure is that we can do just-in-time resource additions. We don't have to build a reservoir, add a reservoir, and add 100% of that capacity all at one time to our core rates. We're recalling portions of reservoirs and portions of compressor capacity as needed to meet our core requirements. There's no development risk for our core customers because this has already been developed. It's already in service. There's no business risk for our core customers. We're taking all the risks as far as marketing this mist interstate storage capacity. To the extent there's years between when we build it and when it's recalled, then the additions to our rate base are already going to be partially appreciated, which is a benefit to our core customers. And on top of all that, our customers get a percentage of the incremental revenue that we create from this mist interstate storage service. From our shareholder point of view, they get the majority of the revenue from this mist interstate storage service. And the mechanism allows these mist recalls to flow into our rate base without need for general rate cases. It basically happens. I mean, there's reviews by the commission staff, but it just happens at the same time we would do it at the same time as our PGA filings without some separate general rate case. So things happen very timely. All right, the next several slides are going to be from our 2016 IRP, which was just published in August and is going through some public hearings right now. This first slide shows our peak day, our design peak day sales load requirement is the black line heading off there. You can see our existing resources that are in place, and the gap there is what the resource plan is trying to fit most economically, most efficiently with new resources. You can see already that mist is in there and that's at the 305,000 decatherm number that we have right now. there's a top line that says recall agreements. That has nothing to do with missed recall. It's a different type of agreement we have with some customers. All right. In our IRP, we look through like 5 different scenarios, some of which we control, most of which we have no control over. And the distinction is whether a new regional pipeline is going to be built, whether it's a Sumas Express by Northmiss Pipeline, Trail West, Pacific Connector. That's what we're referring to as regional pipelines, and we have no real control over the timing of those. If they happen, then it shifts the order of what we're doing. But if none of them happen, then we're on the left-hand side of this graph, which is none of those occur, and we're either going to Northwest Pipeline for our own specific expansion just to serve our needs, or we're doing more on-system development. So in both cases, missed recall, which is the green on both of those, that's the first thing we're using. It's the most cost-effective. The blue on these, hopefully these colors are showing up the same on your screens, is a compressor project within our system that allows us to make full use of our LNG plant at Newport to make sure we take full advantage of the maximum vaporization rate there. And then further out in time, we're going to need something else. And what you start to see here is something called Northmiss 2A, is what looks like IIA, Northmiss 2A. And I'll talk more about that, but it's basically going beyond what we have for once we've exhausted missed recall and this on-system compressor. It's the next project, and it's now starting to show up in our integrated resource plan, where previously it would have been outside the 20-year time horizon. Now it's about 15 years out. So this next slide, I just figured you'd like to see how we flip over our analysis. This is, if anybody needs to be told what a box plot is and what it means, ask me offline. But the whole point of this is, as we've got into the analysis of our different resources, mist is the far left one. It's the lowest cost and has the lowest variability, basically, of any of the resources we're looking at. So this just gives you a little peek at some of the analysis that we do in our IRP. So the last couple slides, I'm going to talk about going beyond mist recall. And the first thing that a lot of you have heard about is called the Northmiss Expansion Project. So that we have to proceed from Portland General. It's a brand new compressor station. It's using one of those reservoirs that has not yet been used for storage, and it's a new pipeline that goes up to the Port Westward area where PG has their power plants. And that's the Northmiss Expansion Project. When we talk about a Northmiss 2 project, we're actually going beyond that Northmiss expansion. So it's after we've recalled all of our existing mist interstate storage capacity, and it's after this Northmiss expansion is done for PGE, then what we're starting to evaluate is a further expansion using another reservoir that adds another 2 BCF of capacity, 100 million a day of deliverability. And these numbers are obviously very flexible because we're talking about developments that are 15 years out. There's other reservoirs, and deliverability is just a function of how many wells do you want to punch in each reservoir. So we're still pretty far out from obviously from doing anything further besides just looking at it from a theoretical standpoint. But you know what? If you call me now, we can start talking about it. And that concludes my part of the presentation. So.
Perfect. Thank you, Randy. I've got a couple of things that I neglected to mention on the front end. The first being that as normal, we are recording this for YouTube, and the link to that can be sent out as well after this. So if anybody knows folks who would like to see this or who would like to review it, please, again, send me an email, and I'd be happy to send out that link here this afternoon. The second thing is that I had a couple of questions in the lead up to this about how Williams Northwest Pipeline and their Plymouth storage facility fits into all of this. If you have any questions about that, we do have Jan Caldwell from Williams on the line, so please go ahead and type into that box any questions you might have about the Plymouth storage facilities as well. But I am not seeing any questions here during the chat function, so we will move things over to Pat. And again, if you have any questions for Randy or for Pat, or ones that could be answered in general by both of them, please type them into the chat function. So I will kick things over to Pat as long as you are ready, Pat.
I'm ready.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm Pat Haworth, and I'm the manager of natural gas storage at Jackson Prairie. The project is located in a rural area 10 miles south of Chehalis, Washington. We're located
Pat,
halfway between.
Can you accept the screen so we can see your slideshow?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry about that.
Perfect. Looking good.
Okay. Yeah, we're located 10 miles south of Chehalis, Washington, a rural area halfway between Seattle and Portland. My background is in petroleum engineering and business management. I've been working in the oil and gas industry for 34 years. I've been here at Jackson Prairie for the last 4 years. And I've got 12 slides prepared, and you can ask questions at any time. Jackson Prairie is a partnership between 3 equal owners. Puget Sound Energy is the operator, and then Williams and Avista, they own equal shares. They're all equal 1/3 owners. The partnership was formed back in 1962 to explore for storage possibilities, and gas was first injected in 1964. Before that, Continental Oil Company drilled the first well here in 1958, searching for natural gas. It was a dry hole, but they did identify the dome-shaped structure that we do store our gas in today. Jackson Prairie is one of over 400 storage fields in the U.S. About 20% of all the natural gas burned in the U.S. during the 5-month heating season is from these storage fields. 80% of those are depleted fields. 10% are aquifer storage, and that is the case here at Jackson Prairie. We're a saltwater aquifer storage field. The other 10% of the fields in the U.S. are salt dome reservoirs. JP supplies about 25% of the region's peak day gas supply. We store approximately 49 billion cubic feet of gas, and we have a working gas capacity of about 26 billion cubic feet. We're able to cycle our gas quickly, so on a yearly basis we will produce about 30 billion cubic feet and then cycle back in 30 billion cubic feet. So our total cycle during the year is about 60 billion cubic feet. We have a total of 104 wells here. 55 of those are gas wells that range in depth from 1,200 to 2,800 feet deep. We have 8 turbine gas compressors here totaling 33,000 horsepower. The project owns 925 acres of surface land, and we lease about 3,200 acres from 120 landowners. But if you look at the actual area that we store gas, we're looking at about 800 acres where we actually have gas underneath the land. We have 8 miles of gas gathering lines, 8 miles of transmission lines, and we have a staff of 16. The project is manned 24/7 around the clock. The next photo is just an aerial view of the Jackson Prairie Compressor Station and processing facility, and this is where all of our compression is located. It's a fenced-in area, and I don't know if you can see my cursor, but our office is over here on the top right hand of the screen. It is in a rural area, which is really beneficial, so we don't have many complaints about noise from our station. We own most of the surrounding land. As I mentioned, our gas is 89% of our gas is stored at around 2,000 feet deep. We have 3 reservoirs, though, that range in depth from 1,200 to 2,800 feet. This is a saltwater aquifer that's about 200 feet thick, sandstone, and it's a dome-shaped structure, and it's capped by thousands of feet of impermeable shale. We get a lot of questions about Aliso Canyon and how Jackson Prairie compares to that field, and so I'll talk about those differences here. This is just a photo showing the location of the Aliso Canyon storage field near the Porter Ranch community, which is a suburb of LA. So their field is in a highly populated area near Hollywood, Burbank. So they got a lot of attention from that. The Aliso Canyon well failed about a year ago on October 23rd of 2015. From what we've read, the leak was about 1,000 feet deep. They lost an estimated 30 million cubic feet of gas per day. The gas did not ignite, but it was odorized, which I guess really irritated the neighbors because of the smell and complaints of being made ill by smelling the mercaptans in the gas. They released about 90,000 tons of methane to the atmosphere, and it took them about from December 4th to February 17th to drill the relief well and get the well plugged. There were 4,400 households relocated, numerous lawsuits and investigations, and then California ordered withdrawals to be stopped and all the wells to be inspected. And the latest cost estimate that I read was about $665 million based upon a press release in May. And the next slide just shows some of the comparison data between JP and Aliso Canyon. Theirs is a depleted oil field. Ours is a saltwater aquifer. We're in a rural area. Theirs is highly populated. Their well that failed, it was 63 years old. It was drilled in 1953. We do have some wells that were drilled back in the 60s, but 83% of our gas deliverability is produced from wells that have been drilled in the last 21 years. So our field is relatively new in that respect. We have 55 gas wells where they have 229. Our wells are shallow, which allows us to be able to submit our wells from total depth back to the surface of the ground inside the surface casing. Whereas Aliso Canyon, their wells are 8,500 feet deep, and the well that blew out was only cemented the bottom 2,000 feet. It's difficult to raise cement all the way back to the surface when you have a well that's 8,500 feet deep, and so we don't face that issue here. Theirs is a much larger field. They store about 86 billion cubic feet. We're about half that size. The deliverability of the wells at Aliso Canyon are similar to ours, about 40 million cubic feet per day, but they store their gas at much higher pressure. When their reservoir is full, they store their gas at 2,700 psi, whereas 89% of our gas is stored at 800 psi or less. Our gas is not odorized. All of our wells have surface safety valves, and I really don't know the answer on Aliso Canyon, whether they have safety valves or not. We haven't had any leaks here, thankfully. And one of the reasons is when we work over wells here, we pull out the pipe and examine it. And even our wells that are 50 years old, we can still read the stenciling, the mill stenciling on the pipe. So this is all pipeline quality gas, and we just don't have any corrosion issues here. As I mentioned, all of our wells are cemented to the surface, so that prevents corrosion, and all of our wells are cathodically protected also. We have confirmed that by running subsurface logs that we don't have any subsurface leaks, so we're in good shape there. Next slide. As far as regulatory compliance goes, we are in compliance with all federal, state regulations. We are a FERC permitted and regulated gas storage facility. The Washington Department of Natural Resources permits and regulates the natural gas wells drilled at JP. Our pipelines and processing facilities are regulated by PHMSA, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. The Washington UTC Office of Pipeline Safety performs audits at JP and shares those results with PHMSA. PHMSA issued an advisory bulletin on February 5th of this year, encouraging underground storage facility operators to voluntarily implement the API recommended practices for underground storage. And PHMSA is in the process of developing new rules to regulate underground storage. But in the meantime, the Washington DNR continues to regulate us here at JP, and they support our plan to voluntarily comply with the API recommended practices. JP has well control and emergency response plans in place. We have well control agreements with Halliburton and Wild Well Control. We have petroleum engineering service contracts in place with 4 different firms, and we hire those firms to review our operations, assess our risk exposure, and make recommendations. And we just plan to continue to use the API recommended practices to guide our operations as we move forward. And I can answer any questions.
Thanks, Pat. We've got a couple of questions that just came in. The first one having to do with why there was no native gas found in the well in the first place. I think you may have covered that a little bit, but
why there was no native gas found in the first well? There was a little bit of low BTU gas here initially, but nothing in commercial quantities.
Gotcha. And then there's a question for both of you, but I'll give you the first crack at it. And would you say that, in your opinion, it's better to expand storage potential and interconnects rather than pursuing new pipelines into the region?
Well, that just all depends on the economics. I think there are still additional development opportunities here at Jackson Prairie for storage. So, And I think that we will be continuing to look at those in the future when the demand is there. Right now, there's just not additional need for storage here, but that may change in the next 4 or 5 years.
Sure, and I've got a clarification here on the first question about native gas, and if there was no native gas found or not a significant amount, is there structural concerns that might put the storage at risk?
No.
All right, and then the last one we have here is if Jackson Prairie has to implement the new proposed storage guidelines, then what effect does that have on the withdrawal capability?
Well, right now I don't see any. We'll just have to see what the new, based upon the existing API recommended practices, there won't be any effect on deliverability.
Okay. Well, Randy, are you still on?
I am.
Good. Well, we've got a couple here that maybe are more specific to you. So the first one, let's see here. First, do you want to make any comments on how the Aliso Canyon gas leak is impacting your operations?
Well, I think what I'm hearing is that we're in really good shape. One of the big issues I've heard is at Aliso and in a lot of fields, you drill down, you set casing, and then you set tubing inside the casing, and the gas flows up both the tubing and that annulus between the tubing and the casing. That's never been the case with mist. It wasn't, and it's not the way Gill Ranch was designed either. The technical term I've heard is it's tubing on packer, which means it seals off that annulus as another barrier against leaks, and we just put in bigger tubing and that's the sole source of the injection withdrawal capacity. So if there was a requirement, for example, to do that, we're already there. And we're probably even more remote than Jackson Prairie is from populations, and we are more scattered. Mist is definitely covers more acreage over hill and dale than Jackson Prairie, but it's in a very sparsely populated area.
And have you noticed any local media interest with after the incident at SoCal?
Not media interest. I think it's certainly got regulators interested in following what's going on in California, and since we have the storage facility in California, the people running that have been reporting back on what's going on there, but nothing yet that I see affecting us.
Sure. And I'm just going to read this one off. It has to do with the RPS. So a new RPS for Oregon has become law, and PGE will most likely build more wind power to meet those new requirements. If PGE decides to build a Port Westward 3 plant to balance out new wind farms, is there enough capacity in the Northmiss Pipeline to serve a new plant identical to Port Westward 2?
Well, we're building this to PGE's needs. It might be for them to answer this question, but the capacity of Northmiss Pipeline is more than is needed for any of their plants individually, but not enough for all the plants they already have there collectively. So it's really as part of their portfolio how they want to divvy it up and use it for any or all of their plants. So did I cap dance around that one? Adam?
Sure. And if these new large ethanol plants are built, will that drive need for more peaking capacity or more pipeline deliverability?
Well, they're not ethanol plants; they're methanol plants, just to be clear. And it's really up to them to line up their gas supplies and capacity arrangements. And those plants are still a good 3 years away from being in service if everything goes well. And I'm sure that's one of the main things they're working on right now, is how to firm that up.
Good. So I see one more from Stephen Simmons that I'll get to. If anybody feels that I've missed their question, please again enter it into the chat so that I can make sure that everyone's question gets answered. The last one here is: can Gill Ranch help with peak demand in SoCal to ease some of the issues from Aliso Canyon?
My understanding, Steve, is that it's going to need some additional interconnects because it actually goes into the PG&E system, not the SoCal system, and um, there's a lot to be worked out there for that to happen.
Good. Any other questions? We will leave it open here for about 1 more minute. In the meantime, I just want to thank both of you, Randy and Pat, for taking the time to do this. Really appreciate it. Remind everyone again to send me an email if you would like to see the show on YouTube or to see the slide decks. I am not seeing any more questions, but again, really want to thank you guys and look forward to seeing all of you again next month.
Thank you.